What can I say? There's still a lot of great R-rated movies that would have made even greater cartoons. And I'm gonna tell you about them now. Now, you may remember a little while ago that I actually did a video about R-rated films that would have made great cartoons, and I still feel like there are a lot more that would definitely qualify, and it's a shame that there were people in the industry that just suffered from a severe lack of vision and imagination. But we can't let that stop us from dreaming these impossible dreams, my children. We cannot let go of hope so easily. As M'Baku said in Black Panther, we will not have it! So without further ado, here are 6 more R-rated films that would have made great cartoons. Number 6, Fright Night. Fright Night definitely stands out as far as vampire films in the 1980s go, with its clever subversion of classic horror movie tropes, as well as sprinkling in a nice bit of humor, as well as some Hitchcock influence, because there is definitely a strong Rear Window vibe going on with this film. Fright Night did a fantastic job of blending its earnest homage to classic vampire films of the past while taking satirical jabs at the genre in a way that few filmmakers have truly ever been able to recreate since. Even the remake with Anton Yelchin and Colin Farrell did a pretty good job of revamping the concept for the remake. See what I did there? The whole I Think My Neighbor is a Vampire main plot of Fright Night notwithstanding, the film actually features a pretty sincere examination of the challenges that young people face as they're growing up, as Charlie Brewster has to decide what he's going to let go from his adolescence as he transitions into establishing himself as a young adult. And I think the film does a really good job of exploring those themes and making it something that really hits home on a, almost after-school special kind of level. This is some heavy shit we're talking about, people. The more you know type stuff. This is a pretty sound foundation on which to build an animated series where Charlie and late-night horror host Peter Vincent have to take on a variety of zany monsters. The film already has something of a Scooby-Doo quality to it, just in the whole mystery of trying to figure out what is the deal with Charlie's neighbor, and I think you can easily translate that to the animated format with little to no resistance. And I can bet you that had they made a Fright Night animated series back in the day, you could have definitely gotten Roddy McDowall to reprise his role as Peter Vincent, like 110%. Number 5, The Wraith. Imagine The Crow meets Mask, and you've kind of basically got The Wraith. This little known gem from the mid-80s features Charlie Sheen as a teenager who was originally killed by a gang of street racers, which included among its members Clint Howard and Nick Cassavetes as the leader, even though at the age of 27, he already looked like the father of a teenager who would lead a street gang, as opposed to the actual leader of a street gang. Like, seriously, I don't know what they were thinking with this casting because it did not work. In any event, Sheen comes back not looking how he did when he was originally alive, but as close as he could get, as is stated in the film. And when he is in his Wraith form, he dons a futuristic body armor as well as driving one of the coolest cars ever put to film, the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor. I mean, this joint was basically the precursor to the car that Michael Jackson turns into in Moonwalker. In his Wraith form, Jake would stalk the members of the street racing gang that killed him and challenge them to drag races which would result in them crashing into the Turbo Interceptor in a fiery blaze. Not that this would result in them burning up in the wreckage, because their bodies would be found pretty much unscathed, but nonetheless lifeless and for some reason without their clothes. As you can probably ascertain at this point, this movie makes zero sense. But the car was cool, and the soundtrack featured more than its fair share of bangers that I'm still rocking out to this very day. All of this is to say that an animated episodic version of The Wraith would have definitely fit right in back in the 80s when we had already been given such hits as Pole Position and Turbo Teen. You remember Turbo Teen? Yeah, you look back on it now and realize that it's 100% nightmare fuel from Concentrate. Number 4, Kickboxer. Raise your hand if you spent your first few years of knowledge of this and Bloodsport and conflated them as if they were one singular film. Don't be too hard on yourself, we were all just 10. Now many may cite Bloodsport as the film responsible for kickstarting, see what I did there? Jean-Claude Van Damme's action movie career, but we can't knock Kickboxer as it went on to have 4 sequels, none of which featuring Van Damme, but he did return for the remake of the film where he plays a mentor to the main character, now played by Alain Moussine. In the original film, Jean-Claude played Kurt Sloan, who sought to avenge the crippling of his brother Eric at the hands of the merciless Tong Po, a ruthless Muay Thai fighter who prepared for fights by kicking concrete pillars. This man is already a cartoon villain as far as I'm concerned, and he just keeps getting more cartoonish with every subsequent appearance in the franchise after the first film as the actor's yellowface makeup becomes more offensive. And not just because yellowface is racially insensitive, but because the quality takes such a steep nosedive after the first film. Naturally, were Kickboxer to be made into an animated series back in the late 80s or even early 90s, you can bet that the makers of it would have acknowledged the film's martial arts basis and decided to infuse the animated series with an array of supernatural elements that had nothing to do with the source material in the first place. If I may present as evidence to the court, the animated adaptations of both The Karate Kid and Double Dragon. Number 3, Tango and Cash. The pairing of Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone was inspired casting for this buddy cop film in which the two play hotshot police detectives who are framed for murder and have to put their egos aside to break out of prison and ultimately clear their names. And despite still loving the film to this day, it is so surprising to hear about all of the behind-the-scenes drama that threatened to derail the film completely at almost every turn. And as the last action film of the 1980s, there were many that felt that it was a poor way to close the chapter on a decade that was dominated by actors like Stallone in terms of action. None of this matters to me, though, because anytime I watch the film, it is still bringing an ear-to-ear grin to my face from the interactions between Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, the inclusion of Jack Palance as the main villain, just chewing scenery like nobody's business. Yes, some of the humor would probably be think pieced to death in this day and age, but there's still a lot about this film that I enjoy to this day, and if nothing else, look at the SUV they're driving in the third act finale of this film, because if that isn't begging to be made into a toy, I don't know what is. This totally already feels very cartoonish, right down to the Harold Faltermeyer score, and just all of the sillier elements of it, and it just kind of plays like something that you would legitimately think they would have tried to make an animated series out of, so it's a shame that they didn't. Number 2, Nightbreed. Often overlooked, but not without its cult following, Nightbreed is a Clive Barker adaptation that I feel stands right up there with Hellraiser and Candyman and still manages to feel fresh and relevant to this very day. The story revolves around a young man named Boone who tells a psychiatrist about these dreams he's been having of a strange place known as Midian, which is apparently inhabited by a variety of monsters. In Boone's search to find this place in the real world, his psychiatrist, who who actually ends up being a masked serial killer, ultimately betrays him, and he is shot by police after being bitten by a member of the Nightbreed, which leads to him ultimately being resurrected as one of their own. It's kind of funny how the thinly veiled men are the real monsters allegory of the film manages to be both absurdly in your face and yet still very grounded and understated at the same time. Now obviously, the biggest challenge of adapting a film like Nightbreed to animation, presumably for an audience of children, has got to be no, not the monsters. The profoundly overt sexual overtones present in most of Clive Barker's work. Barker's exploration of sex and sexuality through his writing has always been rather colorful, to say the least. And make no mistake, Cabal, the novella on which Nightbreed is based, was no exception. A scene in the film in which Boone, in his Nightbreed form, and his still human girlfriend Lori are having an impromptu makeout session. To say that this was more explicit in the original novella would be an understatement. And even saying that would be an insult to the word understatement. Monsters, though? That was like animation's bread and butter back in the day, quite honestly, because, I mean, you had stuff like Inhumanoids, Real Monsters, and whatever the fuck Sectars was. And we can't act like this film didn't have massive potential for action figures back in 1990, because, I mean, look at the opening title card for the film, where you've got one guy in there that's got one of the most unhingiest of unhinged jaws you will ever see. Number 1, Total Recall. So I actually watched Total Recall recently in honor of its 30th anniversary, and I'm not even surprised, but just amazed at how well a lot of the elements of that film hold up. And god damn it, how could you not make this into a cartoon back in the day? What is wrong with you people? Adapted from a short story by Philip K. Dick, this is actually one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best roles, as he plays a lowly construction worker named Quaid who dreams of traveling to Mars and is so driven by these dreams that he decides to go to a company called Recall that can implant memories of an outlandish adventure for him to experience without actually having to go to the planet himself. Unfortunately, something goes wrong with the procedure, and he starts to believe that he is actually a secret agent from the implanted memories that he was going to get. And this kind of kickstarts the whole story as he's trying to figure out the mystery of who he really is, while there are people that are trying to kill him, including his own wife. Quaid ultimately discovers that he's actually Hauser, a secret agent who was tasked with infiltrating a rebel faction on Mars only to defect. Or is he? There's a lot of ambiguity as to whether or not the events of the film were real or happened in the character's mind, but it's all relative depending on your perspective. I just feel like, in terms of science fiction, Total Recall was very high concept for its time, and even now, and I feel like there were so many things you could have done with that concept in the medium of animation. And like my recommendation for Demolition Man from my previous video, I would have definitely called on the talents of Aeon Flux creator Peter Chung to do character designs, because I think that would have just taken things to a completely different level. And again, we're talking about action figures because cartoons are just made to sell toys after all, and you can't tell me that y'all wouldn't have wanted one that had a sort of inflating function to it and having its eyes pop out as if it was being nakedly exposed to the atmosphere of Mars. Like, just imagine yourself on Christmas Day and finding one of those under the tree. Yeah, I put that thought in your mind, didn't I? Hey guys, thanks for watching. As always, if you've got your own thoughts or opinions or recommendations on other R-rated films that would have made great cartoons, you should go ahead and leave a comment in the section below. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the notification bell, share this video with your friends and family, and if you'd like to keep up to date on more at random videos, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button right over here.